Hi and welcome to the channel! The transformation of Powder into Jinx is one of the most tragic and powerful stories in the series Arcane, and we can distinguish as many as 3 character arcs that makes her complete a full parable by distinguish the different phases of her life. From a shy and insecure child, Powder becomes an unpredictable and lethal antagonist, driven by uncontrollable emotions and deep traumas. But how did all this happen? What does Arcane tells us about the transformation of Powder? Today we analyze in detail how this metamorphosis was built through trauma, loneliness and manipulation. The first 3 episodes of the first season are small masterpieces within the masterpiece. They function as a unit in themselves before the time skip. And it is in the first third of the series that we see the corruption character arc that transforms Powder into Jinx. Arcane opens by showing Powder and Violet while they witness, powerless, the death of their parents on the battlefield where the clashes between forces of Piltover and Zone took place. The 2 twin cities are separated by an abysmal disparity. Piltover is rich and technologically advanced, while Zone lives in poverty and decay under the shadows of the former. Although Vander saves the 2 sisters, becoming a father figure for them, Vi is for Powder the last family bond left. This pushes her to develop a morbid attachment to her older sister. Powder follows her everywhere and desperately desires both her attention and her approval. A few years later, Vi is at the head of a small group of friends, Clagger, Milo and Powder. While Vi tries to include her sister in every adventure, Milo does not miss an opportunity to complain about how weak Powder is, how a burden for the team Powder is. Milo's criticism may grow in Powder the desire to make herself useful to the group, and for this reason she begins to build small mechanical bombs that unfortunately never work. And here we glimpse the first hint of fracture. In terms of screenwriting, Powder undertakes a negative character arc of corruption. If you don't know what I'm talking about, let me know in the comments if you want an in-depth tutorial about character arcs. In few words, in an arc of corruption, the character is aware of her truth, but when the lie is presented to her, for some reason or another, perhaps because some components of the lie are fascinating, perhaps because it seems the only road to obtain what we want, or because of manipulation, she will end up rejecting the truth and embracing the lie. Powder has a desperate need for her sister love, and the truth is that Vi adores her and would do anything for her. Powder knows this. However, the fact of not managing to be useful for the band of kids and of being continuously criticized by Milo, considered a burden, unfit, represent a lie. What if she were not enough, and if this made her lose Vi's affection? If she were to continue to be a burden, Vi would stop loving her. This is the lie that Powder ends up believing. In the sequence of the heist at the attic of Piltover, all this dynamics comes out clearly. Despite Milo questioning Powder's usefulness, Vi brings her on the mission, and when the child freezes, terrified at the idea of jumping from one roof to another, Vi stops and finds the right words to encourage her. Vi does not help her physically because she knows her sister could do it and has faith in her abilities. Moreover, Vi wants the others to see as well that she is able to go on with her own strength. Powder jumps and overcomes the obstacle, both physical and psychological. Then when James comes home, Powder, because of her innate curiosity mixed with a pinch of clumsiness, causes the explosion of one of the extract gems that she had found, turning a clean theft into a hair-raising escape. Immediately after, in the sequence of the clash with the gang of delinquent boys that want to steal their loot, Vi, knowing well her sister's limit, knows that she cannot involve her in the fight. Therefore, she entrusts her with the stash and tells her to run away. Unfortunately, one of the bullies manages to follow Powder, and Powder, to save herself, is forced to get rid of the loot, throwing it into the river. This time too, Vi understands that it's not Powder's fault. She's a child, you cannot expect her to stand up to a teenager. Moreover, what would have changed by not bringing her? They already came out quite battered from the fight, and the opponent who followed Powder would have been free to join the fight or steal the loot. Milo, however, hears no reason and accuses Powder of bringing bad luck. A jinx, precisely. So we see that Vi is kind to Powder, but the harsh criticism of the group make the child think if she will not manage soon to make herself useful, Violet will too consider her a burden. And this lays the foundation of the climax of the first narrative arc of the series, at the end of the third episode. When Silco takes Vander hostage, Vi and the group decided that they must try everything to free him and go into action. Violet recommends to Powder to stay home, that this is not a fight for her. But Powder cannot stay with her hands in her lap in such a desperate situation. She feels that if she were to do nothing, it would be the proof that she is really useless. Therefore, she inserts the X-Tech gem that she had stolen in Jay's attic inside her mechanical bombs, and unfortunately everything goes wrong once again. Powder is convinced that she is saving the situation, but the explosion she causes is such as to cause the death of all the boys, with the exception of Violet. In that moment, Powder realizes she is responsible for a tragedy. A trauma that irreparably breaks her psyche. The lies strengthen. Milo was right. She is not only useless, she is harmful. At the same time, Vi, devastated by pain and anger, drives Powder away in a moment of desperation, making concrete her greatest fear. The scene of Powder alone, desperate and abandoned, is the point of no return. It is here that the trauma of loss takes over. Without Vi, Powder is adrift. And then Silco enters the scene, the criminal leader of Zone. Silco immediately understands Powder's vulnerabilities and turns her into a sort of adoptive daughter, exploiting her pain to make her his most lethal weapon. So Powder abandoned her truth. She is convinced that Violet hates her, and she embraced the lie. She is a magnet for trouble and brings bad luck. Thus Powder transforms into Jinx and abandons herself in a psychosis mixed with depression. With the beginning of the proper story, we found a very different Jinx after the time jump. She has grown up and works for Silco, trying to undermine the foundation of Piltover in favor of Zone. In the remaining 2/3 of the first season, we see the Fall character arc that brings Jinx from being Silco's protege, fighting for him and following his rules, to being an agent of chaos and desiring only to see the world burn. Silco acts as a mentor for Powder, but he is also an expert manipulator. He uses his affection to build a bond based on false truth, that Vi betrayed her and then died. Jinx becomes unpredictable, reckless, and her anger is fueled by resentment toward Vi and by hatred for herself. An explosive combination that Silco exploits to push her more and more behind the limit. A central element in Jinx's characterization is in fact the internal conflict. Deep down, a part of her remains tied to Powder, to the vulnerable and good child who only wanted love and acceptance. This conflict is masterfully rendered through her hallucinations, in which Jinx sees Vi and the other members of her lost family. It is a detail that shows how much she is still tormented and in search of an identity. The fight between Jinx and Powder is painfully and incessant. Jinx desperately wants to reconnect with Vi, but she is now imprisoned in a character that she herself created. Silco has convinced her that being Jinx is the only way to protect herself from the world that hurt her, and thus she has given up her most human part. A negative arc of Fall is very similar to a positive arc. The character believes in the lie, it is presented with the truth, but unlike a positive arc, the character will refuse the truth and fall into an even darker lie than the starting one. The triggering factor that moved Jinx at this point of the story is the return of Vi, freed from prison by Caitlyn in exchange for her help to find sufficient evidence to frame Silco. Jinx and Vi meet again, even though belonging to opposite sides, and more than once Vi shows Jinx that she still wants her as a sister and that she is willing to forgive her and that she never really abandoned her, she was only being arrested. However, the presence of Caitlyn makes her think that Violet has replaced her with this girl, also with blue hair, whom Violet loves so much. It makes Jinx think that her sister could be lying to her, using her to get to Silco. Moreover, the mere presence of Vi means that Silco had lied to her, telling her that Vi was dead. Jinx's convictions are repeatedly put to the test during the story, and instead of trusting her sister, she begins to doubt everyone and to think that she cannot really trust anyone any longer. After the clash with Echo that leaves her mortally wounded and the massive doses of Shimmer administered to her by Singe to save her, Jinx definitely loses any bit of control that she still has. Imagine in her delirium that it is Vi and Caitlyn who are torturing her. Hearing Silco consider handing her over to Piltover in exchange for the independence of Zone represent the drop that makes the glass overflow. Jinx kidnaps Caitlyn, Vi and Silco. She ties them to chairs in front of a laid table. It is immediately clear that they are not there to have a tea. In the last episode of the first season, the confrontation between Vi and Jinx reaches the climax. Vi desperately tries to get Powder back, but Jinx is not yet ready to accept the truth. Her new identity is too rooted, and pain, madness and manipulation have taken over. It is a heartbreaking confrontation. We see how much Jinx is consumed by the needs for revenge, but also by the fear of losing Vi again. Jinx asks Vi to shoot Caitlyn herself to prove her that she had not replaced her. She says that in exchange she will return to being Powder. But Vi rightly refuses. Silco swears to her that he would never have sold her to Piltover, that he has her good at heart above everything. But in a flash, while Silco tries to kill Vi, Jinx, in the grip of confusion, makes her choice by killing the surrogate father and saving her sister, letting us understand that a glimmer of powder is still inside her, relegated to the subconscious. However, it is too late. Convinced of having been betrayed both by Vi and by Silco, Jinx rejects the truth and falls into an even deeper lie. Nobody loves her, everybody hates her, and if she has nobody in this world, it is just as well to make it burn. The council was about to grant autonomy to Zone. Silco's plan had succeeded, but Jinx is no longer on Silco's side. She is no longer on anyone's side. Jinx fully embraces her chaotic and destructive identity. The girl who sought love and acceptance has now disappeared, replaced by a figure of hate and pain. And in the end, with a last shot, she blew up the council. But the story does not end here, because during the second season Jinx undertakes a positive arc that brings her on the path of redemption. The truth that is presented to her is always the same, but it is she who changed and is finally able to accept it. Shocked and exhausted, Jinx decided to exit the scene. After having massacred the council, of which Jace and Mel were saved thanks to the girl's magic, Jinx decided that she no longer wants to know anything about the world, about the two cities at war and the people who populate them. Like when, after a moment of excitement, your adrenaline goes down and you are left without strength. However, Without wanting it, she becomes the symbol of resistance, and all the inhabitants of Zone cheers for her. She therefore finds herself in a new position. She has always been considered a loose cannon, uncomfortable, tolerated only as Silco's protégée, but now she has become a point of reference for all the population of Zone, a guide for her people. And it is here that the third narrative arc begins, a positive arc. In fact, she begins believing the lie and at the end comes to accept the truth. That same truth that she had abandoned as powder. The fundamental mechanism of a positive arc is the presentation of the truth to the protagonist, and her initial refusal of the truth until the final acceptance. The second season of Arcane does this. From beginning to end, it tests the lie in which Jinx has hidden herself by putting her in contact with Violet and giving her several times proof of the fact that her sister still loves her and that she is willing to forgive her despite the things she had done. A fundamental role for Jinx's path is played by Isha, a child who idolizes her and who puts her in the same position in which Vi was when they were little. For the first time in her life, Jinx has a little sister to look after, to keep safe, for whom to fear every time she throws herself into action. Jinx began to understand the position in which Vi is and how it also helps that Vi comes into conflict with Caitlyn, who, since her mother was in the council hall when Jinx blew it up, wants nothing but Jinx's death. The fact that Vi enters in conflict with Caitlyn shows Jinx that Vi had not replaced her with Caitlyn, and that she continues to care about her despite everything. Thus, before the end, Jinx managed to reconcile with Violet. I hope that this journey through Jinx's transformation has made you reflect on her character and on how Arcane uses trauma to give depth to antagonists. If you liked the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which other Arcane character you would like to see analyzed. I remember you that if you like science fiction, you can find all my books in ebook and paperback on Amazon. The links are in the description. As usually, I thank all the patrons who support me, and I wish you a good reading and a good writing. Bye!